What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and we're going to give you a very early projected record for the Auburn Tigers for the upcoming 2024 college football season. Before we get to 2024, let's look back at some of the projections from 2023. Here were some of the projections from last year, and you see a 6-6 record for Auburn. Their projection was 7-5. I predicted them to go 6-6. Athlon predicted them to go 6-6, and their over/under was at 6.5. So yeah, we got it right at 6-6, but if they just show up and beat New Mexico State, this team would have gone 7-5, and the projection actually would have been correct. And just imagine if you took the over on the over/under with Auburn, and you lost that bet because they lost to New Mexico State. I'm sure that was frustrating for some people. But again, here's the schedule for 2024, and this is the scale that we use. If it's under 20, over 80, those games are counted as wins or losses. 20 to 29, 70 to 71 to 80%, those games are counted, not counted as wins, but they are games where, you know, they should be favored or underdogs by double digits. And then you have your 30 to 39, 61 to 70. Those are games where I think the spread's going to be closer to a touchdown, 6, 7, 8 points. And then the 50-50 games, they'll say in the white, those are games that could really go either way. And games where, again, I think the spread will be 3 or 4 points, kind of in that range. So let's get to it. We'll start with the easy wins. You got Alabama A&M, New Mexico, and Louisiana Monroe. These should all be easy wins for the Tigers. You know, I know some people say, well, yeah, New Mexico State last year. Yeah, it can happen. But if we're just looking at the odds of how things normally play out, they should take care of business in all 3 of these games. You know, they're not 100%. Nothing's 100%. But again, with the formula that we use, these will be counted as wins. And then I think you got Vanderbilt. That's a game where Auburn should be a double-digit favorite. They get them at home. They are, you know, better team than Vanderbilt. Plus, playing that game at home, I think that's one where they'll probably be favored by a couple of touchdowns. All right, now let's go to games where I think they'll be favored by about a touchdown, 6, 7 points. So we're talking about Cal and Arkansas. I believe Auburn will be better than both of these teams, maybe not by a lot, but home field advantage does make the difference, and that's why these games wind up in the purple and not as 50-50 games, because again, I don't think there's a huge gap between these two teams, although Auburn did beat Arkansas by a lot last year in Fayetteville. But it's a new season, and again, individual games from last year don't really matter. We just put all these teams into tiers. And so, yes, Auburn should be favored, I think, by about a touchdown in both of those games, which means if they take care of business in their first 4 games, they'll be 4-0 heading into a big game with Oklahoma. And speaking of Oklahoma, both the Sooners and then the Wildcats of Kentucky, they're in the yellow. So I think Auburn will be about a touchdown underdog in both of these games. Oklahoma in a tier above Auburn. And then Kentucky, about the same as Auburn, I think, but with that game being on the road, it's just close enough that I do have that game in the yellow. I think Kentucky will be favored by probably 6 points in that game. So games that Auburn can win, but I do think they will be underdogs in both of those matchups. And then sticking with the underdog theme, Missouri and Alabama both on the road. I think Auburn's probably going to be double-digit underdogs in these 2 games. Missouri and Alabama look to be top 10 teams this year. Auburn, looking at right now, probably not a top 25 team. And the fact that they're playing those games on the road, that's why they are in the orange and not the yellow, because again, I do think that Auburn will be double-digit underdogs in both of those games. You never know about the Iron Bowl, of course, and we don't really know how good Alabama is going to be, but I think it's safe to say, again, that Auburn will definitely be underdogs in both of those games, and again, I think it'll probably be double digits. And then I think Georgia, that's one where I just don't see Auburn winning. I mean, they've got a chance, of course, but playing in Athens against Georgia, who might be the best team in the country, I know Auburn played them tough last year, but it's a different story going into Athens versus Jordan-Hare. I think Georgia can pretty much count that as a win. Again, I know it's a rivalry, but if it was at Auburn, I would not feel this way. But being in Athens, I do think Georgia should be able to take care of business in that game. That leaves Texas A&M. That's really their only 50-50 game. So for Auburn, it's like every game you feel like you know who the favorite's going to be, except maybe this Texas A&M game, and that's one that could really go either way. But I talk about how these are projections and not predictions. This is a good example of it. I actually think Auburn might have a better chance to beat Oklahoma than beat Texas A&M, even though with the formula that we use, Oklahoma is in the yellow, Texas A&M is in the white, because again, it's based off of where teams finished last year. And yes, we do look into the future a little bit with this formula, but It's not a prediction. It's just a formula, and that is a perfect example. Again, I think Auburn has a real good shot to beat Oklahoma at home. Texas A&M might be a tougher game. Kentucky might actually be an easier win than Texas A&M. You never know. But again, my predictions won't necessarily line up with these projections. And so what we get when we do the formula is we get 7-5. So same projection as last year for Auburn. If you just go with the favorites in all these games, that would have them losing to Oklahoma, Georgia, Missouri, Kentucky, and Alabama. So that's 5 losses. And really the Texas A&M game is the difference in 6-6 or 7-5. But again, you might win one of those and you might lose to, let's say, Cal or Arkansas. I mean, that's just the way college football goes. But I think a pretty fair projection for Auburn is 7-5, and that's what the formula does put out there. So 7-5 for Auburn. Do you think better or worse? What are your thoughts, your projections on this team? Let me know down in the comments below.